Mike contacted Chad and me and asked if we'd like to explore a bit with our overlanding rigs one day soon. We hemmed and hawed, considering at first going on December 22nd. Then, because the forecast was for miserable weather that day, December 17th, but Chad couldn't make that, so we finally settled on December 21st. Now, I have a problem with my eyes that I need to get fixed. My night vision is pretty poor right now, so I avoid driving at night. And it just seems to me that there was something ironic in that I'd drive an hour and a half before and after our adventure to get to the meetup and back to home. 3 hours wasted getting in place on the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year.
Freezing fog advisory is in effect for Harper Woods, Ellis.
Anyway, we met in Apache, then explored through Medicine Park, the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge, Valley of the Wichitas, and other surrounding locales, while Mike regaled us with stories of the history of the area. It was a good day, and the temperature was in the 40s, instead of the 3 degrees that it was the next day, our original day of the trip.
So we're actually driving into the Slick Hills now, which is all limestone and gypsum, so quite a different from the refuge granite.
This is Ann's Country Kitchen just ahead of us. It's been here for a long time, and it's a pretty famous restaurant, mainly because their pies they have all day long.
I've eaten here many times.
There are the mountains. We're driving around Schoolhouse Slough at Lake Latonka. Kind of a neat little area right next to the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge and the small town of Medicine Park.
That little metal bridge looking thing down there on the right, it drove me nuts trying to figure out what in the world it was. And it turns out it's not all that exciting. They used to give boat rides around the lake, and that's when you would get in the boat rides back in the 50s, I guess.
Really a neat little town.
Yeah, and the improvements the last 20 years have been just mind-boggling.
We parked and walked around Medicine Park for a bit. Then we headed into the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge, which is one of the oldest refuges in the country.
Let's take a little side trip to the old entryway.
Oh yeah, that's a lot nicer than it was the last time I was here.
Yeah, they repainted it and they added a handicap accessible trail that goes down to Lake Elmer Thomas from here, so it's pretty neat. I suspect Mount Scott, well, it should open here pretty soon for vehicle traffic, but I bet they keep it closed because of the fog until later today. Did y'all want to drive up this morning or no?
Yeah, I think it'd be kind of neat.
Okay. Looks open. Got some fog freezing on the trees and grasses up here. Reminds me of our trip last January.
It's just not very windy, actually.
Yeah, I was lucky. If it was whipping up here,
No, I'd be in the truck. I wouldn't be out here.
We have turned down towards the Holy City here in the Wichita Mountains Wildlife Refuge.
The Holy City of the Wichitas is home to the longest running passion play in the United States. Originally housed in Medicine Park, Oklahoma, it moved its current location after completion of the cobblestone structures in 1935. Thousands attend the play around Easter annually.
I actually think the Jed Johnson Tower was the last Civilian Conservation Corps project on the refuge in 1941-ish, I guess. But and it was supposedly maybe some leftover rock they happened to have quarried for the dam and didn't need it, so they said, let's just build an observation tower. You ever walk down to the Ingram Ranch house over there to the right?
I have not.
It's worth a short hike, but apparently the guy that built that did it like I think it was 28 or something like that. But he worked on Fort Sill as a contractor way back then. But he had a quarter section of land, and the refuge let him graze cattle across, I think it's like 10,000 acres, like $1 a year or something like that for a long time. But he lived in a shack while he built that big elaborate 2-story mansion for himself. 1942, I think, is when the Army said we need a bigger artillery range, so they basically absconded a bunch of property, eminent domain, and then when they got done with that, this rearrangement after World War II, they gave some land back to the refuge, and they kept some of the refuge land and just jostled some stuff around.
I was driving along here one time, I was headed the other direction, and I saw a MLRS, a multiple launch rocket system launch. It shot about half a dozen rockets off all of a sudden.
Yeah, they'll park right by the fence and just start firing stuff off. So this is the Ferguson house that burned down, I think it was 2011. There was a welder started a fire that ran across here. But they collected some funds, got some donations, and they rebuilt it, at least the exterior, to look like it did when it was lived in.
The Ferguson Ranch house was completed in 1927. The family grazed cattle in the nearby refuge and also hosted a Texaco gas station on their property. After 1942, their history paralleled that of the Ingram household down the street.
Come to realize we're really good at picking foggy days for trips. We're remarkably good at it.
Who's supposed to submit the weather requests for these things anyway?
Oh, I thought you were doing those, Mark. Man, that's the problem. No one's submitting for good weather.
Do my eyes deceive me, or have we hit dirt?
Finally! So, the high fence on the right side, this is a game ranch, and they used to always have in this field right here zebras, black bucks, and a few other antelopes from Africa, and then a bunch of elk that they brought in, but I don't see any out today.
there's an Atlas missile silo down this road, I guess. Might come back here, gives us some indication where to look.
So, what out there is the old missile silo?
Yeah, this is one of the 12 Atlas LF missile silos in Oklahoma. All you can see from the road now, because the gate's been locked the last few years, is on the right, the Quonset-style building is a little above-ground structure for the missile silo, and then they've added, obviously, a white barn to the side of it.
Yeah, definitely a lot better than driving that pavement.
Agreed. So this is all a restricted area now because of post 9/11 and the dam or whatever, but there's actually a really cool little nature trail up here, and it also allowed for primitive overnight camping if you wanted to get in there, but it's somewhere along here was the site of the old Camp Razminski, which was a cavalry outpost for 2 years until they built Fort Cobb. But Razminski was here to help monitor Kiowa and Comanche action in the 1850s, I guess 1858, 1859. And we'll bring it up later on, but there's a place we're going to go by called Baker's Peak that's tied back to this camp later on.
Is this a state park here?
Yeah, this is Great Plains State Park.
Oh, okay.
The Gold Bells mine is a classic example of the very brief mining rush that occurred in southwest Oklahoma. Active from roughly 1901 until 1910 or 1914, local legend has it that the mine name came from a promoter that appeared locally wearing 3 gold bells on his lapel that he claimed he had cast from ore he had found in the local mine.
We found a spot out of the wind where we could have lunch.
I'm gonna back in this parking spot over here until I get a stove out.
So what are we having, Mike?
We're having some pasole. Made a big old
Pasole.
pot of pasole last night.
red
I'm gonna
pasole.
Reheat it for some lunch today.
What do you guys think? I think it's looking pretty good.
Looks very good.
Hey guys, Eric Young just posted this to Facebook. Oh, the weather outside just sucks, so let's go and wheel our trucks. There's always someplace to go. When it snows, let it snow in 4 low. It doesn't show signs of stopping with ABS a locking, but as long as I drive it slow, let it snow, got to go in 4 low. This is great. That's awesome. When it finally treats us right, how I love going out in the snow, but when the transfer case throws a light, I bitch my stupid Montero. There's a JK in need of recovery. So we snatch it back into discovery. There's always someplace to go. Everybody, let it snow, got to go in 4 low.
Awesome. That's creative.
Yeah.
That's great.
We next headed to nearby Mountain Park Wildlife Management Area. With this being the shortest day of the year, the sun would set early. So we picked up the pace a bit so I'd be home before it became dark.
The Wild Man Miner Camp was somewhere just over here to the left by this little rise, but I don't know that you can see any foundations anymore or anything even. I dropped 2 pins of a map up here. I think they're slightly off from reality, but I can do a double check. But they're Cutthroat Gap and Baker's Peak. And so Cutthroat Gap was around 1833. An Osage scouting party encountered a Kiowa encampment when all the men were gone off on a hunting expedition. As they came in and slaughtered all the old men, the women, the children, and captured some of them. But then Baker's Peak is this big mounded hill to the right of us. And so Baker's Peak is named after Private First Class Baker from Camp Redminski we saw earlier, or drove by earlier today. And so the story goes that in 1859, he was in another private round on a patrol looking for Kiowas or Comanches that were creating raiding parties. And they got in this area, and sure enough, they ran across about 200 Kiowa and Comanche warriors who chased them to that peak. The other private got shot and killed on the open prairie. Baker made it to the top, and the story goes that he stood up there for 2 days before a search party found him, but in the meantime, he had killed 80 of the 200 Kiowa and Comanches. 20 years later, as the Comanches were basically giving up and going to the reservation, most of them were asking to meet this private that they had a name for, but they wanted to eat his heart to have his bravery. So that's Baker Peak and Cutthroat Gap. Which I guess is part of why they ultimately ended up doing some ranching around here, because it's one of those springs that even in drought years doesn't give out.
Schoolhouse coming up?
Yep, there's the Victory Schoolhouse, which every time I drive by, there's less and less of it. When I first moved here, it still had a roof on it.
Welcome to Mears, Oklahoma. No, walk naturally.